A handful of farmers armed with nothing but pitchforks and rage held off an imperial cavalry charge, and won because of salt. Now, before you picture some remote backwater skirmish, understand this. The event I'm about to walk you through happened in 1786 in the Brittany region of what we now call France. And at the time, nobody, not the farmers involved, not the royal authorities, not even the historians watching from Paris, realized they were witnessing a rehearsal for the revolution that would consume the entire nation just 3 years later. Let me set the stage. France in the 1780 was drowning in debt. The crown had spent fortunes on wars, on palaces, on the machinery of monarchy itself. And like any government backed into a corner, it looked around for new ways to squeeze money from ordinary people. One of those ways, the gay bell, a tax on salt that had existed for centuries, but which the crown now decided to enforce with new brutality. Here's the bitter irony, and you'll see why it matters in a moment. In Brittany, salt wasn't luxury. It was survival. Fishermen needed it to preserve their catch. Farmers used it to cure meat through brutal winters. Salt was as essential as bread, yet the tax made it prohibitively expensive for ordinary people. The crown, in other words, had decided to tax necessity itself. By the spring of 1786, resentment had been simmering for months. Local administrators, under pressure from Paris, began cracking down on salt smuggling, the only way ordinary people could afford the commodity. Inspectors were sent out. Raids intensified. And on the morning of June 8th, word spread through the villages around the town of Rennes that a major salt depot was being moved under heavy guard. What happened next wasn't planned. There was no manifesto, no secret meeting of revolutionary councils. Instead, farmers, men who'd never held a weapon beyond a hoe or a scythe, began gathering along the route. Word spread like fire through dry grass. Within hours, hundreds had assembled. Now here's what the farmers didn't know, and this gap, this not knowing, is crucial to understanding what comes next. The royal authorities had decided to send cavalry. Trained soldiers on horseback, armed with sabers, sent to disperse what they assumed would be a mob they could easily scatter. On the afternoon of June 8th, the cavalry unit arrived at a narrow section of road near the village of Rennes-les-Bains. Ahead of them, roughly 400 farmers, many of them barefoot, armed with whatever they'd grabbed, pitchforks, clubs, stones. The commander, confident in his advantage, ordered the crowd to disperse. They refused. And what happened in the next minutes revealed something the nobility had forgotten. That numbers, determination, and nothing left to lose can be more powerful than training and armor. The farmers surged forward. The cavalry, expecting an easy dispersal, found themselves surrounded, overwhelmed, their horses panicked by the sheer press of bodies. Within minutes, it was over. The cavalry unit retreated. The salt depot was seized. And by evening, the salt was being distributed freely among the surrounding villages. The farmers had won. They'd faced down an imperial military unit and prevailed. But here's what nobody grasped in that moment. And I mean nobody, not even the farmers themselves. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was a signal. It proved something that had seemed impossible just months before, that ordinary people could stand against the machinery of the state. And they could win. News of the Cowshed victory, that's what locals called it, the Bataille du Pré aux Vaches, the Battle of the Cowshed, because it happened in grazing land, spread rapidly. Within weeks, similar uprisings were happening across Brittany, then Anjou, then outward. Each one emboldened the next. The crown sent more soldiers. The resistance grew. By 1787, the entire western region was in open defiance. Authorities couldn't enforce the salt tax, couldn't maintain order. The machinery of control had jammed. And crucially, other social classes, merchants, lawyers, minor nobility, began to wonder if perhaps the farmers were onto something. What started over salt became about something far larger, the legitimacy of absolute rule itself. If farmers could defy the crown and survive, what else might be possible? The question hung in the air like smoke, and it hung there for just 3 years. In 1789, the Estates General convened. Peasants and commoners arrived with lists of grievances, cahiers de doléances, they were called. Salt taxes featured prominently. The Third Estate declared itself a national assembly, and by July, the Bastille had fallen. The revolution that would reshape Europe didn't begin with philosophers or intellectuals alone. It began with farmers defending their right to affordable salt. Here's the exhibit piece I want you to notice. This document right here, a petition from the Rennes region dated 1786, signed by over 300 farmers. Look at the handwriting. Most of them couldn't write. They made marks, X's, and yet they signed anyway, committing their names to defiance. These weren't revolutionaries yet. They were just people who wanted to afford salt. The salt tax itself wasn't abolished until 1790, after the revolution was already underway. But the real legacy of the cowshed wasn't the salt. It was the precedent. It was the proof that ordinary people, when pushed far enough, could push back. And that proof, once offered, could never be taken back. Most histories of the French Revolution skip right past 1786. They start with 1789, with the grand gestures and famous names. But the real story, the one that explains how ordinary people found the courage to imagine a different world, it started 3 years earlier, on a dusty road in Brittany, when farmers decided that salt mattered enough to fight for. Subscribe for more hidden histories that reshape the world, the kind your textbooks skipped.